I was being rushed into the emergency room after a sudden stroke hit me when I heard a nurse whisper, "Her husband is in this hospital," with another woman in labor and delivery. What kind of man does that? The moment I heard it, my blood turned cold. Hours later, after I made it through the worst of it, my phone buzzed. I stared at the message on the screen. Then I smiled, and for the first time I felt strangely at peace. Because in that moment, I was no longer his wife. I was preparing for what comes next. You being here means more than you know. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? Let's see how far this story travels. Note some elements of this story are fictional added to bring the message to life. Names and locations are coincidental, but what this story teaches you is something you can carry forward. The wheels of the gurney rolled across the hospital floor in a steady, indifferent rhythm, like a countdown that stops for no one. I stared straight up at the ceiling. Fluorescent panels slid past my field of vision one by one, cold and white like silent frames of a film I hadn't agreed to be in. The smell of antiseptic sat sharp at the back of my throat. Somewhere behind me, Ruth, my neighbor, the woman who had found me gripping the kitchen counter with half my face gone slack, was talking to the intake nurse. She collapsed in the kitchen. One side of her face was drooping. "We've got her. You can wait out front." I heard every word, clearly, as if my ears were compensating for the side of my face that still felt like it belonged to someone else. The two nurses wheeled me around a corner into a narrower hallway. At the far end, a directory sign read, "Floor 3 Labor and Delivery." I didn't have time to think about that, because that was the moment I heard it. They didn't know I was still fully conscious. They spoke low, the kind of low that comes from years of trading quick words between long shifts. "Is her husband here?" "He's up on 3. The second nurse, younger, slightly hoarse, but not for her. The wheels kept rolling, the heart monitor kept beeping, and I lay completely still, not because I couldn't move, but because something inside my chest had just stopped pretending. 27 years. I had spent 27 years explaining things to myself. He's busy. He's stressed. He's not a bad man. He just doesn't know how to show it. 27 years building a house out of those explanations, laying one brick every day, patching every crack before it could widen into something I couldn't ignore. And now a nurse who didn't know my name had brought the whole thing down with one sentence she hadn't meant for me to hear. "Mrs. Holloway." The younger nurse leaned over me, pen light sweeping across my eyes. "Can you hear me? Follow the light." I followed the light, but inside my head something else had already started moving. I'm a paralegal, 23 years in a family law office in Tampa. I know when it's time to start building a file, and I know that evidence doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Floor 3, but not for me. I closed my eyes not because of the pain, but because I needed one quiet second to remember every document. Every time he had slid a pen toward me with that easy smile, "It's just paperwork, honey." I couldn't remember what most of those papers were, but I was going to find out. The doctor was talking. I could hear him somewhere at the edge of my attention asking me to squeeze his fingers, explaining what a transient ischemic attack was, as though I hadn't spent 2 decades filing paperwork for cases where one spouse's stroke became Exhibit A in a divorce proceeding. I squeezed his fingers. I answered his questions. I let them attach the monitors and draw the blood. And the whole time I was somewhere else entirely. I was standing in my kitchen on West Haven Drive. The oak breakfast table I'd picked out myself. The good dishes behind glass cabinet doors always clean, always straight. Late afternoon Tampa light coming through the window above the sink, turning everything gold for about 20 minutes before the sun dropped behind the tree line. I used to love that kitchen. I used to stand there on Saturday mornings with my coffee and think this is a good life. And in many ways, it was. That was the part that made everything so hard to name. Daniel was never cruel the way people imagine cruelty. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't break things. What he did was quieter, a slow, patient kind of disappearing like a tide going out so gradually you don't notice until you're standing on dry sand wondering where the water went. He stopped asking about my day somewhere around year 8. stopped coming to bed at the same time around year 12. By year 20, we moved through that house like two people sharing an office building, courteous, efficient, careful, not to leave things in each other's way. It's just paperwork, honey. The first time he said it, we'd been married about 6 years. Some bank form, he told me. I signed without reading because I was tired and because he had timed the ask perfectly right after dinner, when my guard was down and the path of least resistance was a pen and 30 seconds. Then it happened again, a different form, a different explanation I didn't ask him to elaborate on, and again and again. Here is what 23 years in family law teaches you: keep records, not because you're suspicious, but because you're professional. Every document Daniel handed me, I copied and filed in the accordion folder in my home office. Color-coded tabs, labeled household financial. I kept those copies the way I kept grocery receipts. Habit, discipline. I never once opened that folder and read through what I had accumulated. The last time he asked was 3 months ago, a Tuesday evening. He appeared in the doorway holding a single sheet already folded to the signature line. Need you to sign this before the end of the week. Bank thing. What is it? Just a routine disclosure. You know how they are. I signed it, made a copy, put it in the folder, went back to my case notes. Mrs. Holloway, take a deep breath for me. The doctor's voice pulled me back. I breathed. The monitor beeped. 3 weeks ago, one sheet of paper, a signature line I had filled without reading the title at the top of the page. Tomorrow morning, I was going to open that folder. By evening, they had moved me to a private room on the second floor. The lights were dimmed. The heart monitor beside my bed kept its steady mechanical rhythm, a sound I had already stopped hearing. The way you stop hearing the refrigerator hum at home. My head felt clearer than it had in the afternoon, which was both a relief and a problem, because a clearer head meant I had no excuse not to think. I was thinking about the folder when Ruth knocked. She came in quietly the way people do in hospitals when they're not sure if you're sleeping. She was still in the same blouse she'd been wearing when she found me, pale blue, small white buttons, and she looked more tired than I probably did. I won't stay long, she said. I just wanted to bring you this. She set Daniel's phone on the bedside table. He stopped by around 4, left so fast he forgot it at the nurse's station. They asked if I knew who it belonged to. I looked at the phone. Did he come in? He looked in through the window. She paused. For about a minute. Then he left. After she was gone, I lay there for a long time without touching it. A minute. He had stood outside my hospital room window for 1 minute and then walked back to the elevator. I reached for the phone. My intention was simple. Find the number for Dr. Kaplan, our old family physician whose contact I didn't have saved in my own phone. Daniel had seen him more recently. The number would be in his contacts. I unlocked the phone. Daniel had never set a passcode. He always said it was more trouble than it was worth. I opened the calendar instead of the contacts. Old habit, wrong app. My thumb had already tapped through before I registered the mistake. Today's date sat at the top of the screen. There was one entry at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. St. Joseph's floor, 3 delivery room B. I stared at it. My thumb didn't move. Then I scrolled up slightly to the deleted items still visible in the recent activity log, a feature Daniel almost certainly didn't know existed on this version of the app. One entry, same time slot, removed at 11:53 that morning. Call V back. 2 lives. Running parallel. Logged in the same application, color-coded in the same calendar on the same phone he had left behind by accident at the nurse's station of the hospital, where his wife had just been brought in by ambulance. I put the phone face down on the bedside table. I didn't feel what I expected to feel. There was no wave of grief, no shattering. There was only a cold, settling clarity, the kind I recognized from work, the feeling of reading a document and understanding exactly what it meant, and knowing there was no interpretation left to argue over. I reached up and switched off the bedside lamp. In the dark, with only the green glow of the monitor and the faint light under the door, I picked up my own phone, opened the Notes app, created a new document. I typed 2 words, case file. Then below that, I typed the date, day 1. I signed my own discharge papers at 7:40 the next morning. The nurse at the station gave me a look, the careful kind where someone wants to ask a question but has decided it isn't their place. I smiled at her, took my copy of the discharge instructions, folded them into my bag next to Daniel's phone, which I had sealed in a Ziploc bag the night before. Evidence until I knew otherwise. I had called my mother at 6. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she had been awake already, which meant my father had told her, which meant she had been sitting by the phone waiting. That was how my parents operated quietly without making you feel like a burden, even when you were 1. "Come home," she said. Just that. No questions. Marcus drove me. We stopped at West Haven Drive first. Daniel's car was gone. I had timed it that way. I went straight to my home office, pulled the accordion folder from the bottom drawer. Household, financial color-coded tabs, years of professional habit compressed into 2 inches of paper. I took it without opening it. Took my laptop. Took the fireproof box with our social security cards, birth certificates, and the deed to the house. 11 minutes. Then I was back in Marcus's car. My parents' house was 20 minutes north. My mother was waiting on the front porch. She hugged me once firmly, not soft and lingering, but solid, like she was checking that all my parts were still attached. My father stood in the doorway behind her, hands in his pockets, and gave me a single nod that meant everything he wasn't going to say out loud. Emma was already there, 16 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with her phone face down, which meant she knew something was wrong and was trying to be mature about it. I sat across from her. "Mom," her voice was careful, "are you okay?" "I'm going to be," I said. "We're staying here for a while." She nodded. She didn't ask why. Emma had always noticed things, stored them, processed them quietly. I had watched her watching her father for years. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I unzipped the accordion folder and laid everything out. Bank statements. The forms Daniel had handed me over the years, each one copied and dated in my own handwriting. And at the back, the most recent sheet, the one from 3 months ago, still folded the way he had handed it to me. I opened my notebook, wrote at the top, "Case file day 2. Then I smoothed the paper flat on the table. And I finally read what I had signed. The document from 3 weeks ago was a refinancing agreement. I sat with that for a moment, let it settle. Then I read it again, slowly, the way I read contracts at work, not for the story they tell, but for the story they don't. The property address was ours. The loan amount was $480,000. Both signatures were on the last page, mine, below Daniel's, notarized by someone I had never met. The disbursement account listed was not our joint checking. It was a number I didn't recognize. I set it down, picked up my pen, and the memories started coming back the way they always do when you finally stop pushing them away, not in order, but in weight. The first time Daniel suggested he handle the finances, we had been married 3 years. It made sense at the time. He was good with numbers. I was busy at the office. "You handle the hard stuff all day, honey. Let me handle this at home." It had felt like generosity. Within 2 years, I had been removed from the primary checking account and added back as a secondary holder. He explained it was for tax purposes. I didn't ask which tax purposes. Then came the credit card, a supplemental card in my name. He said useful for emergencies, good for our credit score. I used it twice in the first year. After that, I forgot about it, mostly because whenever I reached for it, Daniel would say, "Use the joint card, I'm tracking the points." So I did. I found the supplemental card statements now in the folder. 12 months of charges I hadn't made. Restaurants in parts of Tampa I never went to. 2 car rentals. A hotel stay in Clearwater on a weekend Daniel had told me he was at a sales conference. I counted the total. $14,700. 7 times he had handed me papers to sign. I found copies of all 7 in the folder, each one dated, each one carrying my signature above a description I had never read carefully enough. Re-registration documents, insurance riders, a home equity line of credit opened 4 years ago that I had no memory of ever using. I had kept every copy out of professional habit. I had never once treated them as what they actually were. "You worry too much about paperwork, Sandra," he used to say whenever I asked a question he didn't want to answer. "That's your job talking. At home you can relax." I had believed him. Or perhaps I had simply found it easier to believe him than to follow the thread. I looked at the stack of papers spread across my parents' kitchen table. The clock on the microwave read 2:17 in the morning. I wrote in my notebook 7 documents, 5 years, one account I don't recognize. Then underneath, tomorrow, call the bank. I was on hold with the bank when Daniel's car pulled up. I saw it from the kitchen window, his silver Accord parking slowly the way he always did when he was trying to appear unhurried. He sat inside for almost a minute before getting out. When he did, he was carrying flowers, yellow tulips still wrapped in the grocery store plastic. He had straightened his collar before walking up the front path. I pressed the mute button on my phone and opened a new note instead. I wrote down the time, the place, and every word I could hear through the screen door. In Florida, I knew better than to record someone without consent, but I could document what happened, and my father had heard it too. My father answered the door before Daniel could knock twice. I stayed at the window out of the sightline from the porch, close enough to hear everything through the screen. Ted. Daniel's voice was warm, practiced. I came to check on Sandra. Is she... She's resting, my father said. I'd really like to see her, even just for a minute. She's resting, Daniel. A pause. When Daniel spoke again, the warmth had thinned slightly at the edges, not gone, but adjusted the way a salesman adjusts his pitch when the first approach isn't landing. I understand you're protective of her. I am, too. She's my wife. Another pause. But taking Emma without telling me, staying here without discussing it, that's not how we handle things in our family. Sandra knows that. My father said nothing. This house isn't the answer, Daniel continued. His voice dropped lower now, not aggressive, just quieter, which was somehow worse. The house is in both our names. Our finances are in both our names. If she starts making unilateral decisions, I can't promise everything stays clean. I don't want that. But if she pushes, I can't control how things unfold. Silence. Tell her I came, Daniel said finally. Tell her I still want to work this out. I heard the front door close, heard my father's footsteps in the hallway, heard Daniel's car start and pull away from the curb without hurrying. I stopped the recording. My father appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at me at the phone in my hand, at my face, at the recorder app still open on the screen. He was a man of very few words, my father. Had been his whole life. You heard all of that, he said. It wasn't a question. Every word. He nodded once. Went to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup without offering me one, which meant he needed a moment to be angry in private. I labeled the audio file threat number 1 day 3 front porch. Then I went back to my notebook and wrote one more line beneath tomorrow call the bank. Also call a lawyer. Patricia Walsh's office was small and deliberately unremarkable dark wood desk files stacked in careful columns, a window that looked out onto a parking lot. No diplomas on the wall, no framed motivational quotes, just work visibly accumulated, which told me everything I needed to know about her. I had found her through the firm where I worked. One of the attorneys I filed for had mentioned her name twice in the past year, in contexts that suggested respect rather than courtesy. That was enough for me. She listened without interrupting. That was the first thing I noticed. I laid it out in chronological order, the calendar entry on Daniel's phone, the refinancing agreement, the 7 documents, the supplemental credit card, the audio recording from this morning. I had brought printed copies of everything I had so far organized by date paper clipped in groups. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the refinancing agreement and read it the way I had not for the story it told, but for the one it didn't. The disbursement account, she said. You don't recognize this number. No. And your signature is notarized. Yes, I signed it. I just didn't read it carefully enough to understand what I was signing. She set it down, folded her hands. Here's where we are. The refinancing is legally executed on its face, both signatures, proper notarization. But there are 2 grounds to challenge it. First, if your signature was obtained under false pretenses, that's coerced consent. Second, if the funds were disbursed into a non-joint account without your knowledge, that's dissipation of marital assets. She paused. Both are arguable. Neither is guaranteed. What do we need? Time mostly, and we don't have much of it. She pulled a calendar toward her. Refinancing disbursements typically process within 21 days of final signing. You signed 3 months ago, which means the funds may already have moved. But if we can get a temporary freeze order before the account is drained further. She looked up. I need to file by Friday. That gives us 5 days. And the mediation hearing, already scheduled for Monday. That doesn't move. She picked up her pen. Mrs. Holloway, you have 21 days from Friday to build a case strong enough to freeze those assets, counter any custody argument he raises, and walk into that courtroom with enough documentation that the other side has nothing left to stand on. I looked at her. I've been building files for 23 years. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but close. Then you already know what I'm going to ask you to do next. I stood up, picked up my bag. I'll have the bank records to you by tomorrow morning. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk and opened my phone, dialed the bank's document request line. It rang twice before someone answered. I was already talking before I reached my car. The bank confirmed they would have the records ready within 24 hours. I was still on the phone when I pulled into my parents' driveway, and I stayed in the car an extra 10 minutes, finishing the call, writing down reference numbers, reading bank account details to make sure nothing was missed. By the time I came inside, dinner was already on the table. My mother had made pot roast, the kind that takes all afternoon, which meant she had started it before I left for the lawyer's office, which meant she had needed something to do with her hands. We ate without talking much. Emma told us about a history assignment. My father refilled everyone's water without being asked. Normal things. I held on to them. After dinner, Emma went to her room. My mother began washing dishes. My father and I sat in the living room with the television on low, neither of us watching it. His phone rang at 8:17. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened in the small, controlled way it did when he was preparing to be civil to someone he didn't want to be civil to. He answered it. Ted. He listened. Yes, she's here. Listened again. His eyes moved to me briefly, then away. I see. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was flat and deliberate, the voice he used when he had decided exactly how much he was willing to say. There's nothing to discuss, Beverly. Good night. He set the phone on the armrest. Daniel's mother, he said. It wasn't a question. What did she say? He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully, the way he always did. My father had never once in his life said something he later wished he could take back. She said she and Gerald were concerned about you, about your health, about Emma. He paused. She mentioned that, given your recent, she called it a neurological episode, it might be worth discussing whether a temporary guardian should be appointed to help manage decisions while you recover. I kept my face still. She used the words support, my father added, several times. I picked up my notebook from the coffee table, wrote guardianship day for Beverly called Dad, framed as concern, timed immediately after lawyer meeting. I underlined the last part. The timing was not coincidental. Daniel had seen me leave Patricia's office. Or someone had. You did the right thing, I said, ending the call. My father looked at the television. I know I did. I took out my phone and typed a message to Patricia. Daniel's parents have started moving on guardianship. Called my father tonight, framing it as welfare concern. Need to discuss preventive measures tomorrow. I sent it, set the phone face up on the cushion beside me. My mother came in from the kitchen, drying her hands. She looked at both of us. Tea, she asked. Please, I said. She went back to the kitchen. My father unmuted the television, and I sat there in the quiet of my parents' living room, thinking about the word Beverly had used. Support. I had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous offers come wrapped in the language of help. Dr. Okafor's follow-up appointment was at 9 in the morning. I had slept better than the night before. Not well, but better. 4 uninterrupted hours, which felt like a gift. I was at the clinic 10 minutes early, sitting in the waiting room with my notebook open, going over the list of things Patricia needed from me before Friday. Bank records, copies of the 7 documents, the audio file from Daniel's visit transferred to a secure folder and time-stamped, the credit card statements. I was still writing when they called my name. The follow-up room was smaller than the main examination suite, 1 chair, 1 table, a blood pressure cuff on the wall. Dr. Okafor came in 2 minutes after I sat down. He reviewed my chart standing up, then pulled the chair around and sat across from me the way he had before. "Blood pressure is down from admission," he said. "Still slightly elevated, but moving in the right direction. How are you sleeping?" 4 hours last night, more than the night before. Stress levels. I considered the question honestly. Present, but manageable. He made a note. "Are you still at home?" "I've moved to my parents' house." He looked up from the chart. Not surprised something more careful than that. "Is that a permanent change?" "It's a necessary one." He set his pen down. This was the moment I had noticed with good doctors, the moment they decided to stop asking indirect questions. "Mrs. Holloway, I reviewed your file again this morning. The clinical picture is consistent with stress-induced vascular event. Not exclusively, but significantly." He paused. "If there are circumstances in your home environment that contributed to elevated stress over an extended period, that is medically relevant information. It belongs in your record." I looked at him. "Are you offering to document that?" "I'm telling you it's accurate, and that accuracy serves your health record." He picked up his pen again. "Is there anything you'd like me to include in my clinical notes regarding environmental stressors?" I thought about Beverly's phone call, about the refinancing agreement, about Daniel standing outside my hospital window for 1 minute before walking back to the elevator. "Yes," I said. "I'd like you to note that marital conflict has been an ongoing source of significant stress, and that in your clinical judgment, removal from that environment is consistent with reducing recurrence risk." He wrote it down without hesitation. "One more thing," he said, still writing. "If you require this documentation for any legal proceeding, I'm willing to provide a formal declaration. You'll need to have your attorney submit a records request through the standard process." "I understand the process," I said. He looked up. Something in my tone had told him what he needed to know. "I imagine you do." He finished writing, signed the note, slid the chart closed. Outside in the hallway, my phone buzzed. The bank. I stopped walking, put my back against the wall, and answered it before the second ring. I pressed my back against the hallway wall and did not move for the next 14 minutes. The representative's name was Kevin. He had a careful, measured voice, the kind trained to deliver information without editorializing, which I appreciated because I needed facts, not sympathy. I had my notebook open against my forearm and wrote as he talked. "Mrs. Holloway, I've pulled the full transaction history on all accounts associated with your Social Security number going back 24 months. I want to walk you through a few items that were flagged when I ran the report." "Go ahead." First, 8 months ago, there was a property appraisal fee charged to the joint account, $450. The service provider is listed as Coastal Valuation Group. Does that name mean anything to you? It didn't. No. The request was initiated under your husband's login credentials. A pause. The property appraised was your primary residence on West Haven Drive. I wrote it down. Appraisal 8 months ago, initiated by Daniel Westhaven. Second item, Kevin continued. The supplemental credit card ending in 7741 held in your name. The current balance is $14,712. The card has been active for approximately 3 years. Average monthly charges over the past 18 months run between $600 and $900. I didn't apply for that card. A brief silence. The application on file is dated 3 years ago. The signature matches our records for your name. Another pause. Would you like me to read you the date of that application? Please. He read it. I checked it against my list of 7 documents. It matched the third one, a Tuesday evening pasta on the stove, Daniel in the doorway, with a single sheet already open to the signature line. Insurance rider Honey, standard stuff. I had signed an application for a credit card with a $15,000 limit. I kept my voice even. I'd like certified copies of the application, the full transaction history on that card for the past 36 months, and documentation of every account opened or modified under my Social Security number in the past 5 years. I can have that ready for pickup by end of business tomorrow. I'll be there at 8. We open at 9, Mrs. Holloway. I'll be there at 9. I ended the call, stood in the hallway for a moment without writing anything. A nurse walked past with a cart. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang and was answered. I looked at my notebook. Third document. Tuesday evening. Insurance writer. He had been building this for 3 years, possibly longer. Not impulsively, not carelessly, methodically. One signed page at a time, each one timed for the moment when I was most likely to ask the fewest questions. I thought about the word Patricia had used, dissipation. I wrote in my notebook card $14,700, not my signature. Or it was. Either way, not my knowledge. Original application pickup tomorrow. Then I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and called Patricia. "I have the first confirmation," I said when she answered. "It's worse than we thought, and it goes back further." Patricia had advised me to go back to work, not because everything was fine, it wasn't, but because routine created cover. If Daniel believed I was functioning, normally moving through my days without urgency, he would be less likely to accelerate whatever he was planning. So on day 6, I drove to the office, filed what needed filing, answered what needed answering, and kept my phone face up on my desk all day. I left at 5:15. The parking lot behind the building was half empty by then, the far end already in shadow from the oak trees that lined the back fence. I was 2 rows from my car when I heard a door close behind me. I knew it was him before I turned around. Daniel walked toward me with his hands in his pockets. No flowers, no folder, nothing in his hands at all. He was wearing the blue shirt I had ironed for him approximately 200 times over the course of our marriage. He stopped about 6 feet away. He didn't know that I had turned on my voice recorder the moment I heard the car door. "You look better," he said. "I feel better." "Good." He nodded slowly the way he did when he was organizing his next sentence. "Sandra, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I came to the house. I said some things that probably didn't come out right." "They came out fine," I said. I understood exactly what you meant. Something shifted behind his eyes. The careful warmth retracted slightly. "I know you've talked to a lawyer." I didn't confirm or deny it. "That's your right," he said. "I'm not here to stop you. I just want you to understand something before this goes any further." He took one step closer, still calm, still measured. "I've been patient, Sandra. I've given you space. But patience has a shape and a limit. If you force this into a courtroom, I cannot promise you that the version of our marriage that comes out in those documents is going to be the one you want Emma to read about someday." I looked at him. "Are you threatening me, Daniel?" He smiled, small, almost sad. "I'm talking to my wife. In a parking lot, after hours, without telling me you were coming." The smile stayed. "I just want us to resolve this like adults." "Then contact my attorney." I took a step around him. "All communication goes through her from now on. You have her number." I kept walking, steady pace, did not look back. I reached my car, got in, locked the door, sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see him still standing in the same spot, watching. I stopped the recording, labeled it Threat Number 2 Day 6 Office Parking Lot. Then I called Patricia. "He came to my workplace," I said. A pause on her end. Then, "How close did he get?" 6 feet, maybe less at one point. "Did he touch you?" "No." "Good. Send me the recording tonight. We're filing for the restraining order tomorrow morning." Ruth knocked at 7:15 the next evening. I heard the knock from the kitchen where I was going through the bank documents I had picked up that morning, 9 pages of transaction history, each line a small confirmation of things I had already begun to suspect. My mother answered the door. I heard Ruth's voice, low and uncertain, saying she didn't want to intrude, and then my mother saying, "Come in, sit down, I'll get Sandra." Ruth was standing just inside the front door when I came out. She was holding her phone in both hands the way people hold things when they're not sure they should be holding them at all. "I don't want to make trouble," she said. "I want you to know that up front." "You're not making trouble, Ruth." She looked at the phone. "After everything that happened with me driving you to the hospital, and then Daniel coming by and the way he left so fast," she paused. "I started paying more attention. To the street. To what was normal and what wasn't." She held the phone out toward me. "This wasn't normal." I took the phone. The doorbell camera app was open to a saved clip. The timestamp read 3 nights ago, 11:47 p.m. The footage showed Ruth's front path, the sidewalk, and the edge of the street in a wide-angle view that caught more of the neighborhood than most people realize those cameras captured. Parked 3 houses down, engine-off lights off a dark sedan. Florida plates. Someone in the driver's seat visible only as a silhouette, but clearly present, clearly not moving. "It was there the night before, too," Ruth said. "And the night before that. Same spot, same car. I think I couldn't get the plates on the first 2 nights. The angle wasn't right. But on this one..." She reached over and pinched the screen to zoom. The plate came into partial focus. 7 characters. Florida registration. I took out my own phone and photographed the screen. "How long did it stay?" I asked. "About 40 minutes each time. Then it left. Never did anything. Just sat there." She looked at me carefully. "Do you know whose car it is?" "Not yet," I said, "but I will." I handed her phone back. She held it for a moment, then said quietly, "Sandra, I've lived next door to you for 11 years. I've watched you carry things by yourself that most people would have asked for help with a long time ago." She stopped. "You don't have to do that anymore. Whatever you need from me, I'm here." I wrote down the plate number in my notebook when she left. Then I opened a new entry, surveillance night 567, dark sedan partial plate number. Cross-reference needed. I underlined the plate number twice. Then I picked up my phone and sent it to Patricia with one line. "We may have a surveillance issue. Looking into the plate tomorrow." Marcus picked me up at 7:30. Daniel left for work between 8 and 8:15 on weekdays, had for years reliably the one consistent thing about him. I had timed us to arrive at West Haven Drive at 8:20. Marcus waited in the car with the engine running while I went inside. I moved quickly, room by room, Emma's remaining things from her closet, a box of files from my office I hadn't taken the first time, the medication in the bathroom cabinet that had my name on it. 11 minutes again. I was getting efficient at this. I was almost back to Marcus's car when I stopped. The garage door was still open. Parked inside beside Daniel's empty space was my old Camry, the one I had stopped driving 2 years ago when the air conditioning failed, and Daniel had said he'd get it fixed and never did. He had been using it occasionally ever since. I had forgotten it existed until this moment. I handed Marcus the box. 1 more minute. The Camry's trunk released with the same sticky resistance it always had. I had to press the latch twice. Inside a folded moving blanket, a bag of road salt left over from a winter trip to Atlanta, and a cardboard box pushed against the back panel that I did not recognize. I pulled it out, set it on the garage floor, opened it. Inside was a manila folder thick with paper held shut with a rubber band. I removed the rubber band, opened the folder. The first page had our address at the top. Below it, refinancing agreement primary residence. The loan amount was printed in bold in the 3rd paragraph, $480,000. I turned to the last page, both signatures. Mine below Daniel's, notarized 3 months ago. Beneath the refinancing agreement was a second document, a repayment schedule, 3 pages, formatted like a standard loan amortization table, except the account number in the header was not our joint account. It was the same number I had written down from the bank records, the one I didn't recognize. And beneath that, a handwritten note on a torn piece of paper, 4 lines, a name I didn't know, first name only, and a phone number with a Tampa area code, and 2 words underneath school district and February. I stood in the garage for a long moment. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked at the folder in my hands, at my face. He didn't ask what it was because I think he already understood. "We need to call Patricia," he said quietly. "Right now." "I know." I put the folder under my arm, walked to his car, got in. My hands were not shaking. I noticed that deliberately, the way you notice things you want to remember accurately. 13 days, I thought. The disbursement deadline. We have 13 days. Marcus pulled out of the driveway and parked 2 streets over away from the house. Neither of us said anything about why. We both understood that sitting in front of West Haven Drive while I made this call was not a good idea. He turned off the engine. I dialed Patricia. She answered on the second ring. "Sandra." I found the original refinancing documents. I said. Physical copies, hidden in the trunk of a car Daniel has been using. I have them in my hands right now. A brief silence. Are they the executed copies, both signatures, notarization? Yes, and there's a repayment schedule attached. The disbursement account number matches what the bank gave me yesterday. I opened the folder across my knees. Page 1, paragraph 3, loan amount $480,000. Page 4, section 2, C disbursement instructions to account, ending 8847. Page 7, notarization dated the 14th, 3 weeks ago. Notary seal, Hillsborough County. I heard her writing. And the repayment schedule is the account number in the header. Yes, same number, 8847. Sandra. She set her pen down. I could hear the difference in the background sound. This changes what we can argue. If the disbursement account is demonstrably not a joint account and the funds have been directed there without your informed consent, we have a much stronger case for dissipation, possibly fraudulent transfer. A pause. But I need those originals filed before the account moves again. I need to get the freeze application in front of a judge before Friday. That's 5 days. What do you need from me? Bring me the documents today, this afternoon if possible. I'll have my paralegal start the freeze application tonight. Another pause. There's also something else. The handwritten note you mentioned the name and phone number. I have it. Don't call that number. Don't search it from any device connected to your home network or your work network. Bring it with the documents and let me handle the trace. Her voice was careful now, the kind of careful that meant she had already thought 3 steps ahead. If that note connects to who I think it might connect to, it becomes part of a much larger picture. Marcus was looking at the steering wheel, giving me privacy the way he always did, present but not intrusive. I'll be there in 40 minutes, I said. I'll be here. I ended the call, sat for a moment with the folder on my knees, the refinancing agreement on top, my own signature visible at the bottom of the last page. Marcus started the engine without being asked. 40 minutes, Obui said. 40 minutes. He pulled onto the street. I closed the folder, held it flat against my lap with both hands, and did not look at my signature again. 5 days to Friday. 13 days to the disbursement deadline. 1 phone number I wasn't allowed to call yet. I had been building files for 23 years. I had never needed one this badly. I delivered the documents to Patricia at 2 in the afternoon. She spread them across her desk without a word, reading in the focused, unhurried way that good attorneys read things as though time was irrelevant and accuracy was everything. Her paralegal photographed each page before I left. I was back at my parents' house by 4:30, in time for dinner, in time to sit across from Emma and talk about something ordinary. We managed 20 minutes of ordinary before my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Beverly Holloway, Daniel's mother. I answered, then immediately said, Beverly, before this conversation goes any further, I need you to know I'm documenting this call for my attorney. Beverly, I said. Sandra. Her voice was warm in the way that certain things are warm surfaces that have been in sunlight without actually generating any heat themselves. I've been thinking about you so much. How are you feeling? Daniel told us about the episode, and I've just been worried sick. I'm recovering well, thank you. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. A pause perfectly timed. I hope you know that Gerald and I are here for you. Whatever you need, that's family. That's kind of you. Of course. Another pause, longer this time. Sandra, I have to be honest with you because I think honesty is what real family does. I've been talking with Daniel and he's struggling. He's worried about you, about Emma, about the situation. Her voice shifted slightly, just slightly, into something softer and more deliberate. When someone has a health event like yours, a neurological thing, it can affect judgment. Not permanently, not in any serious way. But in the short term, decisions made during that period can sometimes be, she searched for the word, reactive, rather than considered. Beverly, I'm not saying anything against you, sweetheart. I want you to understand that. I'm saying that a judge, looking at the timeline, a wife who left the family home with the child within 48 hours of a neurological episode, who retained a lawyer Before she'd even fully recovered, a judge might draw certain conclusions about stability, about what's best for Emma. I let her finish. Outside the kitchen window, the oak tree in my parents' backyard was completely still, not a single leaf moving. "Beverly," I said, "I want you to know that this conversation is being recorded." Silence. "Everything you've just said has been documented and will be summarized for my attorney this evening. If you want to continue, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, any further communication should go through legal counsel." The line went dead. I stopped the recording, labeled it Threat Number 3 Day 9, Beverly Holloway Custody. Then I looked up. Emma was standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, a glass of water in her hand, watching me. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to. It's okay." I set the phone down. "Come sit with me for a minute." She sat. I did not explain the call. She did not ask me to. We just sat there together in the quiet kitchen, and that was enough. I went to bed at 10:30, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark of my childhood bedroom, the same room where I had done homework at a desk that was now a nightstand, where the ceiling still had a faint water stain in the shape of something I used to think looked like Florida. And I ran through the timeline the way I always did when my brain refused to stop working. Documents, dates, account numbers, the handwritten note Patricia was tracing. 13 days now, 12. At 12:40, I got up for water. I didn't turn on the kitchen light. I filled a glass at the sink and stood there in the dark, drinking it, looking out the window above the counter the way my mother did every morning with her coffee, taking in whatever the backyard had to offer. Then I moved to the front of the house. I don't know what made me look. Instinct, maybe. Or the particular quality of the silence outside, too settled, too deliberate for a residential street at that hour. The car was parked 2 houses down on the opposite side of the street. Dark-colored, I couldn't tell the make in the streetlight. Engine off, lights off. But there was someone in the driver's seat, a shape, a silhouette. The faint orange point of what might have been a phone screen illuminating a face briefly before going dark again. I went to my father's door and knocked twice softly. He opened it in 10 seconds, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. "Front Street," I said, 2 houses down. He followed me to the living room window. We stood to the side of it, not directly in front, looking out at an angle. He looked for a long moment without speaking. Then he pulled his own phone from his pocket and photographed the street. "Plates," he said. "I can't read them from here." But Ruth gave me access to her camera app. I opened it on my phone. The doorbell camera was angled wide enough to catch the edge of the street. I could see the car in the feed parked exactly where it appeared from the window arrived 43 minutes ago, according to the motion log. We watched the feed together in the dark, my father and I standing in his living room at 12:50 in the morning. At 1:11, the car pulled away. No hurry, no particular direction, just gone. My father went back to bed without saying anything. That was how he handled things. He found unacceptable silence first, then action, never the other way around. I stayed at the window another few minutes. Then I wrote in my notebook, Surveillance Night 10, arrived 12:17 a.m., departed 1:11 a.m., 54 minutes. Partial plate visible on Ruth's feed. Cross-reference with Night 567. I sent the footage timestamp to Patricia with a single line. "It happened again. Same car, I think. Same pattern." Then I went back to bed, lay in the dark, listened to the house breathe around me. They were watching, which meant they were worried. Good. I slept 3 hours after the car left. By 6:30, I was at the kitchen table with coffee and the bank documents, working through the transaction history line by line, the way I worked through discovery files at the office methodically, without skipping, making small notations in the margin. Emma came down at 7. She made toast, kissed the top of my head without saying anything, and took her breakfast back upstairs. That small gesture, the normalcy of it, the deliberate effort she was making to treat the kitchen table, covered in legal documents as simply where her mother worked, now undid something in me that I hadn't realized was still held tight. I took a breath, went back to the documents. My phone buzzed at 7:43. Unknown number, Tampa area code. The message read, "Withdraw the filing. He doesn't want to hurt you. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I put my coffee down, screenshotted it, did not reply. 8 minutes later, a second message from the same number, "You have a daughter." Think about what a long court process does to a kid. Think about what it does to her relationship with her father. Is that what you want for her? I sat very still for a moment. Emma's footsteps moved across the ceiling above me. Her bedroom, her morning routine, the particular pattern of her getting ready for school that I had memorized over 16 years without ever consciously trying to. 3 steps to the closet. Pause. 4 steps to the bathroom. I looked at the second message again. You have a daughter. I forwarded both screenshots to Patricia with a note. Anonymous threats, day 11, unknown Tampa number. Second message references Emma, requesting trace if possible. Also escalating the restraining order request, he came to my workplace, now anonymous contact. This is organized. Then I wrote in my notebook, threat number 4, anonymous day 11. 2 messages 8 minutes apart, escalating. I underlined the word organized twice, because that was the thing that the messages had gotten wrong, the fundamental miscalculation in whoever had sent them. They thought mentioning Emma would make me hesitate. They thought a mother's fear for her child was a vulnerability they could press on. They had it exactly backward. Every time they mentioned Emma, they reminded me precisely what I was doing this for. Every time they invoked her name as a threat, they handed me another reason to make sure I didn't stop. My mother came into the kitchen. She looked at my face, then at the phone on the table, then back at my face. More coffee, she asked. Please, I said. She refilled my cup, set the pot back, paused with her hand on the counter. Sandra, are you safe? I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said. I think they're scared, and scared people make mistakes. She nodded once, went back to the stove. I picked up my pen and kept working. Diane Prescott had known me for 9 years. We had met at an elementary school fundraiser when Emma was in 2nd grade. She'd been running the book sale table with the calm efficiency of someone who had organized larger things than book sales, and I had ended up helping her for 3 hours without either of us planning it. We'd been friends in the particular way that works when 2 people are both too busy to be sentimental about it. Occasional dinners, reliable check-ins, the kind of friendship that doesn't require maintenance because it's built on something sturdier than frequency. She had texted me 2 days ago, when you're ready, I have something for you. No rush, but don't wait too long. I met her at the coffee shop on Armenia Avenue at 2 in the afternoon. Corner table, backs to the wall, the way she always preferred to sit. She was already there when I arrived, a folder on the table in front of her, her coffee untouched. I want to be clear about something first, she said before I had even sat down. I didn't go looking for this. People came to me. When word got out quietly, just in the community, that you were going through something, people reached out because they'd seen things. Over the years, I sat down. What kind of things? The kind that don't make sense until you see them all together. She opened the folder. Inside was a single typed page, 8 names each, with 2 or 3 lines of description. These are people who are willing to make a formal statement. Some of them saw how he spoke to you at school events. One of them is the coach from Emma's soccer team 3 years ago. Daniel screamed at her in the parking lot after a game, in front of other parents. She filed a complaint with the league that he talked his way out of. Diane tapped the page. 1 is your neighbor on the other side, not Ruth, the one with the corner house. She has 3 years of notes about noise, about the night he threw something against the garage door, about the morning you came out to get the newspaper, and she could tell you'd been crying. I looked at the list. 8 people. None of them had any reason to help me except that they had seen something true and had decided it mattered. They know this might mean testifying, I said. They know. I told them exactly what it might involve. Diane closed the folder and slid it across the table to me. Sandra, the thing about Daniel is that he was always very careful at home, but he was never careful enough in public. He thought public was safe because no one was paying attention. She picked up her coffee. People were paying attention. I held the folder in both hands. 8 names, 8 people who owed me nothing. 8 people who had watched, remembered, and decided that the truth was worth their time. Daniel had spent 27 years managing his image in this community. He had attended the right events, shaken the right hands, smiled in the right photographs. He had never once considered that the people in those photographs might be watching him back. I put the folder in my bag. "Thank you, Diane." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just finish it." Patricia called at 4:17 on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the parking lot of the grocery store my mother had asked for milk, and I had needed 20 minutes away from the documents, away from the notebook, away from the particular quality of concentration that had become my default state for the past 13 days. I was sitting in the car with the milk on the passenger seat, not quite ready to drive back yet when my phone rang. "The restraining order came through," Patricia said. "Temporary pending the full hearing, effective immediately." I looked at the windshield. A shopping cart rolled slowly across the lot in front of me, pushed by no one heading nowhere in particular. 100 yards, she continued. "Your current residence and your workplace. If he comes within that distance, it's a violation. One violation and we go back to the judge the same day." A pause. "I also filed the asset freeze application this morning. The judge has 48 hours to review. If she signs it, and I believe she will, the bank is notified before the disbursement window closes." "How confident are you?" "Confident enough that I filed it as a priority motion." Another pause. "Sandra, the documentation you brought me is unusually complete. Most clients come in with pieces. You came in with a structure. It made everything faster. 23 years of filing other people's cases, of understanding that a document without context was just paper, but a document in sequence told a story that was very difficult to argue against. I had built that structure without knowing I would ever need it for myself." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait 48 hours for the freeze, and we prepare for Monday." Her voice was careful. "The other side will receive notice of the restraining order today. Expect a reaction." I drove home, told my parents. My mother sat down at the kitchen table and pressed both hands flat on the surface, the way she did when she needed to feel something solid. My father went to the window and looked out at the street for a long moment without speaking. That night, I checked Ruth's camera feed at 11, at midnight, at 1 in the morning. The street was empty. The spot 2 houses down where the dark sedan had parked for 4 consecutive nights was occupied by nothing, just pavement, just the yellow wash of the streetlight, just the ordinary silence of a neighborhood at rest. I sat with that for a while. It was a small thing. 1 absent car on 1 quiet street. It proved nothing by itself, and I knew better than to read too much into a single night. But I had not felt the particular weight of being watched since I had walked out of that parking lot 2 days ago, and its absence was something I noticed in my body before I noticed it in my mind, a loosening slight, but real, in the place between my shoulder blades where I had been carrying it. I wrote in my notebook day 13, restraining order effective, asset freeze pending, surveillance absent tonight. Then below that, 8 days to Monday. We have enough. Almost. I closed the notebook, turned off the bedside lamp. For the first time in 13 nights, I fell asleep before midnight. I was on my 2nd cup of coffee when Patricia called. The documents were spread across the kitchen table the way they always were in the morning. Now the notebook open to the current page, the tracking sheet I had made for myself, with each piece of evidence numbered, and dated the folder from Diane with the 8 names. My father had already left for his morning walk. My mother was in the garden. Emma was upstairs getting ready for school. The house had the particular quiet of early morning that I had come to rely on as an hour where I could think without managing anyone else's reaction to what I was thinking. Patricia didn't waste time on a greeting. The freeze order came through. Judge signed it this morning at 8:45. The bank has been notified. I set my coffee down. The account ending in 8847 is frozen as of this morning, she continued. No withdrawals, no transfers, no disbursements until the court lifts the order or issues a final ruling. The refinancing cannot proceed. A brief pause. Sandra, we stopped it, with 6 days to spare. I looked at the kitchen table, at the accordion folder, at the notebook with day 1, written at the top of the first page in my own handwriting in a hospital room in the dark 2 weeks ago. 6 days, I said. 6 days. Which means whoever was planning to move that money is now looking at a frozen account and a court order they didn't expect to be dealing with this quickly. Her voice shifted slightly. Not quite satisfaction, but something adjacent to it. Expect them to move on a different front today, possibly within the hour. I thanked her, ended the call. I sat there for a moment without moving. Outside the kitchen window, the Tampa morning was doing what Tampa mornings did in November. Pale blue sky, the particular quality of light that was warm, without being heavy, the kind of day that had no strong opinion about what happened in it. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and for the first time since I had lain on that gurney, looking up at fluorescent lights, while a nurse said words she hadn't meant for me to hear, for the first time in 15 days, I smiled. Not for anyone. Not because it was appropriate. Just because something that had been wrong was now in one specific and measurable way less wrong. It lasted about 40 seconds. Then my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. No area code I recognized. I looked at it, set my coffee down, turned on the recorder. Then I answered, Mrs. Holloway. The voice was male professional, careful, the voice of someone who had been told to make a call and had prepared for it. My name is Robert Carver. I'm calling on behalf of Daniel Holloway. I'd like to discuss the asset freeze order that was issued this morning and explore whether there's a path to resolving this matter without further court involvement. I pulled my notebook toward me, uncapped my pen. Mr. Carver, I said, you have my attorney's number. I'll let her know to expect your call. I ended the call, wrote the name down, sent it to Patricia with 3 words. They moved fast. Her reply came in under a minute, I know. So will we. Robert Carver called Patricia at 9:15. She called me at 9:40 to summarize. The conversation had lasted 11 minutes. Carver's position, as Patricia relayed it, was that the asset freeze was an overreach, that the refinancing had been a joint financial decision made by both parties, that the disbursement account was a legitimate instrument used for estate planning purposes, and that the freeze was causing undue financial hardship to his client. Estate planning, I said. That's the word he used. Daniel has never once in 27 years mentioned estate planning. I know, Patricia said. I told him we'd need documentation of that claim going back at least 3 years. He said he'd have it to me by end of week. A pause. He won't. There is no documentation because there was no estate planning, but it buys them 2 days to figure out their next move. I understood the play. Delay, reframe, create enough procedural noise that the other side spends time responding to claims instead of building their own case. I had watched attorneys do it from the other side of the desk for 2 decades. What do we do? I asked. We don't respond to the estate planning claim until they produce documentation, which they can't. In the meantime, we keep building. She paused. Sandra, I need the 8 names from Diane formatted as potential witness declarations. Can you have that to me by tomorrow? I'll have it to you by tonight. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table converting Diane's typed list into proper declaration formats, names, relationships, dates of observation, specific incidents. It was the kind of work I had done thousands of times at the office. My hands knew how to do it without my brain having to think too hard, which meant my brain was free to notice when my phone rang at 3:47. Unknown number, different from this morning's. I opened my notebook before answering. The moment I heard Carver's voice again, I wrote down the time and number. Mrs. Holloway. Carver again, same prepared voice, same careful cadence. I apologize for contacting you directly. I understand communications are meant to go through counsel. I just wanted to make one thing clear, person to person, before this escalates further. A pause. My client has significant resources and significant patience. A prolonged court process will be difficult for everyone involved, particularly for your daughter. I want you to consider whether the current path is truly in your family's best interest. I let him finish. Mr. Carver, I said, this is the second time you've called my personal number today after being directed to contact my attorney. I'm recording this call. I'll be forwarding it to Patricia Walsh, along with a note about the pattern of direct contact. I'd also suggest you review the terms of the restraining order, which covers harassment by proxy. I paused. Have a good afternoon. I ended the call, labeled it Carver Direct Contact Attempt number 2 day 15. Then I called Patricia. He called again, I said, mentioned Emma, mentioned resources and patience. A silence on her end. Then, they're more worried than I thought. That's good for us. Another pause. But Sandra, brace yourself. When people get worried, they get creative. I think tomorrow is going to be a difficult day. She was right. She just didn't know yet how difficult. Patricia called at 8:03 the next morning. I knew from the way she said my name, no greeting, just Sandra, flat and immediate, that something had shifted overnight. "Get here as soon as you can," she said. "Don't bring Emma." My mother was in the kitchen when I came downstairs with my bag. She looked at my face and didn't ask any questions. She just said, "I'll drive Emma to school." I was at Patricia's office by 8:30. She was standing when I came in, which she never was. The document was already on the desk, printed and paper-clipped, facing me. She waited until I sat down before she spoke. Gerald and Beverly Holloway filed an emergency petition with the family court yesterday evening, she said. They are requesting that the court evaluate your legal capacity to make decisions regarding your own welfare and Emma's care on the grounds that your recent, and I'm quoting directly here, neurological event has created documented uncertainty regarding cognitive and emotional stability. They have named Gerald Holloway as proposed temporary guardian. I looked at the document. My name was in the header. Below it, in formal legal language, was the argument that I could not be trusted to make my own decisions. I read it twice, slowly. They're asking the court to suspend your authority over the asset freeze filing, Patricia continued. If a guardian is appointed, even temporarily, your existing legal actions could be paused, pending a capacity evaluation. The freeze order could be challenged. The Monday mediation could be postponed. She sat down across from me. This is the most aggressive move they have, Sandra. It is also, in my opinion, the most transparent. They filed it the morning after the freeze order was granted. The timing is not subtle. Can they succeed? Not if we respond correctly. She leaned forward. A guardianship petition based on medical incapacity requires medical evidence. Their filing cites your TIA as the basis. We counter with Dr. Okafor's declaration, the one specifically noting that your cognitive function is fully intact and that the marital environment, not any neurological damage, is the recurrence risk factor. She paused. But I need him to be available to sign an updated declaration by Friday. Today is Wednesday. I was already reaching for my phone. There's something else, Patricia said. She waited until I looked up. This petition was filed by Gerald and Beverly, not by Daniel, which means Daniel either asked them to do it or allowed them to do it. She let that sit for a moment. Either way, this is no longer just a husband and wife in a deteriorating marriage. This is an organized effort involving multiple family members, coordinated legal strategy, and a deliberate attempt to use your health against you. She folded her hands. I want you to understand what you're actually dealing with. I put my phone on the desk, looked at my name on the petition again. I understand, I said. Good. She picked up her pen. Call Dr. Okafor today. I dialed before I left her office. Dr. Okafor had a cancellation at 2 o'clock. His receptionist told me this when I called from Patricia's parking lot, and I took it as the kind of small, practical luck that you don't question, you just accept it and keep moving. I drove straight there, sat in the waiting room for 6 minutes, was called back before I had finished organizing my thoughts. He came in carrying my chart and the printed copy of the guardianship petition that I had photographed and emailed to him an hour earlier. He sat down across from me, read the petition once more all the way through without speaking. When he finished, he set it on the desk between us. They've cited the TIA as evidence of compromised cognitive and emotional stability, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, that is not an accurate characterization of your condition. His voice was even not indignant, just precise the way a person is precise when they are very sure of what they are saying. The cognitive assessments we conducted within 12 hours of your admission showed no impairment. Memory, reasoning, executive function, all within normal range. The TIA produced transient physical symptoms. It did not affect your capacity to understand information, evaluate options, or make decisions. He paused. I want to be clear about something. The guardianship petition implies that your medical situation supports their claim. It does not. In fact, the clinical picture supports the opposite conclusion. The opposite conclusion, I said. The primary modifiable risk factor for a recurrence event in your case is not neurological, it's environmental, specifically prolonged exposure to high-stress relational conflict. He picked up his pen. I wrote that in your chart 3 weeks ago. I am prepared to state it in a formal declaration in precisely those terms for submission to the family court. I looked at him. You understand what you're agreeing to. I understand that accurate medical documentation serves my patient's health and safety. He held my gaze. Mrs. Holloway, someone filed a legal document claiming your brain doesn't work properly. My records say otherwise. I think the court should have accurate information. He drafted the declaration while I sat across from him. It took 14 minutes. He read it back to me, once made 2 small adjustments. At my suggestion, the word significantly changed to demonstrably in one place, a date corrected in another, and then signed it. I held it in both hands for a moment before I put it in my folder. Thank you, I said. Follow up with me next week, he said. And Mrs. Holloway, your blood pressure today was the best it's been since admission. He stood. Keep doing whatever you're doing. I drove back to Patricia's office with the declaration on the passenger seat, flat face up so I could see his signature from the corner of my eye. 5 days to Monday, I thought. We have the medical front covered. But as I pulled into the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a message from Patricia, call me when you're close. Something new on the surveillance plate trace. Patricia had the trace results on her desk when I arrived. She didn't hand them to me immediately. She waited until I sat down, which was how she handled things she wanted me to absorb carefully, rather than react to quickly. Then she slid a single printed page across the desk. The plate came back registered to a rental company, so she said. Enterprise Tampa International location. The rental was booked online, paid with a corporate card. She paused. The corporate card belongs to Meridian Sales Group, Daniel's employer. I looked at the page. The card is registered to the company account. She continued, not to Daniel personally, which means either Daniel used a company card for a personal purpose or someone else at Meridian authorized the rental. She folded her hands. Either way, the surveillance on your parents' home was funded with company resources. That is not a domestic dispute anymore. That is a workplace ethics violation at minimum and potentially criminal harassment depending on what the rental agreement shows about the driver. Who was driving? She slid a second page across. It was a screenshot Ruth's doorbell camera, the wide-angle footage from night 10, zoomed and enhanced. The image was grainy but legible. A man in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Heavy jaw, dark jacket. Looking directly at the camera without realizing the camera had the angle to catch him. Ruth's camera captured him clearly on the 3rd night, Patricia said. She didn't mention the wide-angle feature when she first showed you the footage. When I asked her to check the full resolution archive, this is what came up. A pause. I ran the image through a reverse search. It matches a LinkedIn profile for a man named Craig Dunn. He's listed as a regional account coordinator at Meridian Sales Group. Daniel's colleague. Someone from his office. Someone who had sat outside my parents' house for 4 nights in a car rented on a company card, watching the lights go on and off. I sat with that for a moment. He used his workplace, I said. Not a question. More like saying it out loud to make it fully real. He used his workplace, Patricia confirmed. The card, possibly the man, all connected to Meridian. She picked up her pen. I'm going to need to contact their HR department. Not to cause him professional trouble, that's not our goal. But because if this reaches the mediation table and he tries to characterize you as paranoid or unstable, I want documentation that the surveillance was real, it was organized, and it was funded by his employer without your knowledge. I thought about the anonymous text messages. You have a daughter. Think about what a long court process does to a kid. Someone had sent those from a Tampa number while a man from Daniel's office sat outside my parents' house in a company rental car. I wrote in my notebook surveillance organized Meridian Resources Craig Dunn corporate card. Then underneath, this is not just a marriage anymore. Patricia cleared her desk on Thursday afternoon. That was how I knew she was shifting into a different mode. She pushed everything to the edges, left only the active case in the center, and worked from there outward. I had seen attorneys do it at the office before trial prep. It meant the thinking phase was over, and the execution phase had begun. She laid out what we had in the order she intended to use it. First stack, Dr. Okafor's declaration, the medical record establishing cognitive capacity, the clinical note about marital stress as the primary recurrence risk. They will open with your health, she said. They've already signaled that with the guardianship petition. We let them make the argument. Then we put this on the table and the argument disappears. Second stack. The refinancing documents, the bank records, the account ending in 8847, the repayment schedule, the credit card in my name with $14,000 in charges I hadn't made. After they finish with health, they'll pivot to finances, try to frame the freeze as overreach as a wife acting unilaterally against a joint decision. We put this on the table. The account number does the work for us. Third stack, the surveillance, Craig Dunn's photograph, the enterprise rental record, the Meridian corporate card, the 3 audio files, Daniel at my parents' door, Daniel in the parking lot, Beverly on the phone. This is the piece they won't expect, Patricia said. They've been careful about everything else. They were not careful about this. She looked at me across the desk. The guardianship petition goes last. We counter it with the medical declaration, the witness statements from Diane's list, and the documented pattern of coordinated pressure, the calls, the texts, the surveillance. The argument is simple. This is not a family concerned about a woman's health. This is an organized effort to neutralize a legal opponent. I looked at the 3 stacks, 21 days of work organized into 3 piles on a lawyer's desk. What's the order? I asked. Medical first. It resets the room. Financial second. It establishes motive. Surveillance third. She paused. We let them attack you. We let them finish. And then we put it all down at once. I nodded. Then I said, there's one thing I don't have yet. She looked at me. Daniel used company time to manage all of this, I said. The calls, the coordination. If he used his work email, if any of this ran through Meridian's internal system, that's documentation of workplace resource misuse that goes beyond Craig Dunn and the rental car. If we had that, he couldn't make a move at the mediation table without it following him back to the office. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That kind of documentation would have to come from inside Meridian. I know, I said. Do you know anyone inside Meridian? I thought about the company parties I had attended over the years, the faces I had smiled at, the names Daniel had mentioned, and I had filed away without thinking I would ever need them. There might be someone, I said, someone with a conscience. Patricia looked at me steadily. If someone reaches out to you voluntarily with information, they have legitimate access to that is usable. If you solicit it. I understand the distinction, I said. She nodded once. Then we wait and see. I had stopped expecting things to arrive on schedule. After 19 days of building a case from whatever the day chose to offer a phone in a Ziploc bag, a folder in a car trunk, a neighbor's camera angle wider than either of us had realized, I had learned to keep my expectations loose and my notebook close. Things came when they came. The work was to be ready when they did. I was in my childhood bedroom at 8:40 on a Thursday evening, reviewing the witness declaration formats I had sent Patricia when my phone rang. Tampa area code, a number I didn't recognize. I turned on the recorder, answered, Mrs. Holloway. A man's voice, careful, quiet, with the particular hesitation of someone who had rehearsed an opening line and then decided at the last second to abandon it. You don't know me. My name is Paul Garrett. I work at Meridian, in Daniel's division. I sat up straighter, said nothing, waited. I heard through it, doesn't matter how, I heard you're going through something difficult. A pause. I want to be clear about why I'm calling. It's not personal. Daniel and I aren't close, but I've been at Meridian for 11 years, and I have a certain view of how things are supposed to work. And what's been happening in our internal systems for the past few months is not how things are supposed to work. What's been happening? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel has been using his Meridian email account and his work hours to manage what I can only describe as a personal, legal, and logistical operation. Correspondence with a private investigator, emails about financial accounts, messages to someone he refers to only as his attorney, but not through any official company legal channel. He stopped. There are also messages about you, about the situation, about what he was planning to do before the mediation. A breath. He copied 2 other people in our division on some of these, which is how I saw them. I kept my voice even. Mr. Garrett, why are you telling me this? Because he used a company system to do it, he said simply. That's not a marriage problem, that's a professional ethics problem, and I've been sitting with it for 2 weeks trying to decide what to do. Another pause. I'm going to forward you the relevant emails tonight. After that, I'm going to delete them from my sent folder. What you do with them is your business. I understand, I said. Mrs. Holloway. He hesitated one last time. I don't know what your marriage was like. That's not my place. But I know what those emails say, and I think you should too. He ended the call. I sat in the dark of my childhood bedroom for a long moment. Then I opened my email app and watched the screen. 3 minutes later, the first email arrived. The subject line read, FW situation with Sandra, keep this between us. I called Patricia. He reached out, I said. Voluntarily, it's already in my inbox. A silence. Then, don't delete anything. Send it all to me tonight. I sent Patricia the emails at 10:43 that night and didn't sleep until after 2. When I woke at 5:30, the house was completely still. My parents' neighborhood in early morning had a particular quality of silence, not empty, just unhurried, the sound of a place that had decided nothing needed to happen yet. I lay in the dark for a few minutes, running the day ahead in my mind. Saturday. 2 days to Monday. Patricia had said she would review the emails overnight and call me in the morning. My phone lit up at 5:51. Not Patricia. A number I had saved years ago under a name I rarely had reason to use, Melissa, Kevin's wife. Kevin was Daniel's older brother. Melissa and I had exchanged pleasantries at family holidays for a decade and a half, the careful surface-level warmth of 2 women who had been placed in proximity by other people's choices and had made the best of it. I had not heard from her since before the hospital. The message read, Sandra, I'm sorry. I don't know what the right thing is here, but I can't keep sitting with this. Please don't tell anyone where this came from. Below that, 3 screenshots. I sat up in bed. Enlarged the first image. It was a group chat. The participants were listed at the top, Gerald, Beverly, Kevin, and 2 names I recognized as Daniel's cousins. The thread was dated. I checked the timestamp 4 days before I had been discharged from the hospital. Beverly had started it, Daniel called. It's worse than he said. She had some kind of brain episode. This might be our opening. If we move quickly on the guardianship before she gets legal advice, we can frame it as family concern. Gerald, can you talk to the attorney Monday? Gerald already on it. The key is timing. Once she lawyers up, it gets harder. Kevin, what about the house if she contests the refinancing? Beverly, that's why we need to move before she does. Daniel says she's still in the hospital. We have a window. I read it 3 times. They had begun planning before I left the hospital. Before I had made a single phone call, before I had opened the accordion folder or called Patricia or done anything except lie in a hospital bed and write case file day 1 in a notes app. They had seen my TIA not as a family crisis but as an opportunity, and they had started a group chat about it. I forwarded the screenshots to Patricia with a single line, premeditated. All of it, from before I even got home. Then I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in the early morning quiet. My mother found me there at 6:15. She looked at my face. She had always been able to read my face, even when I was trying to prevent it, and sat down across from me without a word. After a moment, she said quietly, "How bad?" I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. "Bad enough," I said, "but we have it in writing now." She nodded, put her hand over mine, left it there. Outside, the oak trees were beginning to catch the first light. Marcus arrived at 7 with takeout from the Thai place on Dale Mabry that my mother had always liked. Nobody had planned it. He had texted at 6:30 asking if he could stop by, and my mother had said yes before I could say anything either way, which was how my mother operated when she decided someone needed to be somewhere. He came in carrying 4 containers and a paper bag, and my father shook his hand at the door with the particular formality he reserved for people he had decided to respect. We ate at the kitchen table, the same table that had been covered in documents for 3 weeks, now cleared and set with actual plates. Emma talked about a history project. My father asked Marcus about his work. My mother refilled everyone's water. For 45 minutes, the case file did not exist. Then Emma went to her room. My parents moved to the living room, and Marcus and I sat at the table while I spread everything out one final time. He didn't touch anything, just watched while I went through it, organizing, checking, making sure each piece was in the sequence Patricia and I had agreed on. Audio files, 3 recordings labeled time-stamped, transferred to a secure folder Patricia could access. Medical declaration, Dr. Okafor's signature on page 2. The phrase marital stress as primary recurrence risk factor underlined in my copy for my own reference. Financial documentation. The refinancing agreement, the bank records the credit card statements, the account ending in 8847. Surveillance, Craig Dunn's photograph, the enterprise rental record, the Meridian corporate card trace. Workplace emails, Paul Garrett's forward 6 messages, Daniel's name in every header. Family chat screenshots, Beverly's words, "This might be our opening," printed and paperclipped to Gerald's response. Witness declarations, 8 names, 8 signed statements, 8 people with no reason to lie. Marcus watched me go through all of it. When I finished and put the last document back in its folder, he said, "Are you ready?" I thought about what ready meant. I thought about the gurney and the fluorescent lights and the nurse's voice saying words she hadn't meant for me to hear. I thought about the folder in the car trunk and Diane's list of 8 names and Melissa's message arriving in the dark at 5:51 in the morning because she couldn't keep sitting with it. I thought about 21 days. "I've been ready," I said, "since they left me alone on that gurney." He nodded. Didn't say anything else. That was one of the things I had always valued about Marcus. He understood when a thing had been said completely and didn't feel the need to add to it. My parents came back in to say goodnight. My mother held my face in both hands for a moment, the way she had when I was small, looked at me carefully, and then let go. After Marcus left and the house was quiet, I sat at the table alone for another hour, not reviewing anything, just sitting with it. At 11 o'clock, I put everything in the bag I would carry tomorrow. Turned off the kitchen light. Stood in the dark for a moment. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I went to bed, and for the second time in 21 nights, I fell asleep before midnight. I wore the gray blazer. Not because it was my best one, it wasn't, but because it was the one I wore to depositions. The one I had put on every time I needed to walk into a room where the other side had decided in advance that they were going to win, and remind them by simply being present and prepared that they had miscalculated. Marcus drove me. We didn't talk much on the way, which was right. Patricia had asked me to arrive by 9:15, which gave us 45 minutes before the session opened. Enough time to review the sequence one more time, to sit with the material, to let the preparation settle into something steadier than nerves. The Hillsborough County Family Justice Center on North Pierce Street had the particular atmosphere of all government buildings, designed to handle the worst days of people's lives. Fluorescent lighting, linoleum floors, the smell of recycled air, and old coffee rows of plastic chairs along the walls. Functional, deliberately neutral, a place that had no opinion about what happened inside it, only procedures. Patricia was waiting near the entrance. She took one look at me and gave a small nod, the kind that meant everything was in order, and we were not going to discuss feelings about it. We walked to the mediation wing together. Marcus sat in the waiting area outside the way we had agreed. This part was mine. I saw them when we turned the corner into the corridor. Daniel was standing with Robert Carver on the left side of the hallway about 30 feet ahead. Gerald stood slightly behind them, hands clasped, wearing the expression he always wore in public, measured respectable, the face of a man who had decided long ago that dignity was a performance and had practiced it accordingly. Beverly was beside him, her posture very straight. Daniel saw me at the same moment I saw him. We looked at each other across 30 feet of linoleum floor for approximately 1 second. I had wondered in the nights before this morning what that moment would feel like, whether I would feel anger or grief or the particular hollowness of looking at someone you had built a life with and recognizing that the life had been built on something that was never as solid as you believed. What I felt was none of those things. What I felt was clarity. The same cold, settling clarity I had felt on the gurney when the nurse's words had rearranged everything. The sensation of a thing becoming exactly as simple as it actually was. I turned my eyes away, not because I couldn't hold his gaze, because there was nothing in that direction that required my attention anymore. Patricia touched my arm lightly. "Room's open," she said. I followed her to the door. Behind me, I could hear the other side beginning to move the shuffle of papers, the low exchange of last-minute instructions, the sound of people who had planned something and were now committed to it. I thought about Beverly's message in the family chat. This might be our opening. I thought about my accordion folder, about 23 years of professional habit, about the nurse who hadn't known I was listening. The mediation officer held the door. "Ready," Patricia said quietly. "Yes," I said, and I walked in. The mediation room was small. 8 chairs, 1 table, 1 window with frosted glass. Judge retired Carol Weston was already seated at the head when we came in, still experienced giving nothing away. We sat. Patricia to my left, Daniel directly across from me, Carver beside him, Gerald against the wall. Daniel was wearing the blue shirt I had ironed approximately 200 times. He still wouldn't look at me. Judge Weston confirmed the ground rules and turned to Carver. "You may proceed." Carver straightened his jacket. "Thank you." He opened his folder and looked across the table at Patricia, not at me, never directly at me, as though I were a variable in an equation rather than a person in a chair. 21 days ago, Mrs. Holloway suffered a transient ischemic attack, a stroke event, documented serious, and we would argue directly relevant to the decisions she has made in the period since. Patricia wrote something on her pad, did not look up. The decisions made in the days immediately following that event, Carver continued, include vacating the marital home with the couple's minor child retaining counsel and initiating unilateral legal action regarding jointly held marital assets worth nearly $500,000. He paused. We submit that these decisions were made during a period of medical vulnerability. A court-ordered independent capacity evaluation is not only reasonable, it is necessary to protect all parties, including Mrs. Holloway herself. He leaned back. My client has been patient. He has been cooperative. He came today not to fight, but to find resolution. Carver glanced at Daniel. "Mr. Holloway, would you like to add anything?" Daniel looked up, not at me, at Judge Weston. "I love my wife," he said quietly. "I'm scared for her. That's all this is." The room was silent. Judge Weston turned to our side. "Ms. Walsh." Patricia set her pen down, looked at Carver directly for the first time. "That was a thorough opening. I have a few questions." She placed the first document on the table. "Mr. Carver, you cited Mrs. Holloway's neurological event as evidence of compromised decision-making. Are you familiar with Dr. Emmanuel Okafor, neurologist, Tampa General?" Carver glanced at the document. "I'm not sure what this—" "He treated Mrs. Holloway," Patricia said. "Conducted standard cognitive assessments within 12 hours of admission." She slid the declaration across. His sworn statement, page 1, paragraph 3. "Would you like to read it aloud, or shall I—" Carver picked it up. "Read it," said nothing. Patricia read it for him. "The patient demonstrated no impairment in memory, reasoning, or executive function. The primary modifiable risk factor for recurrence is environmental, specifically prolonged exposure to marital conflict. She set her copy down. So when you describe Mrs. Holloway's decisions as products of medical vulnerability, you are directly contradicting the sworn testimony of the physician who examined her brain. Carver shifted in his seat. That declaration addresses one narrow clinical point. It addresses the entire foundation of your argument, Patricia said. Not unkindly, simply accurately. Gerald shifted against the wall. Daniel's jaw tightened, the small, almost invisible tightening I had learned to read over 27 years. Patricia reached for the second stack. "Shall we talk about the finances now?" she said, "because I think everyone in this room will find them very interesting." Patricia placed the refinancing agreement on the center of the table, face up, both signatures visible. The loan amount in bold on the first page, $480,000, readable from every seat in the room. Nobody touched it. "Mr. Carver," Patricia said, "your client has described the asset freeze as an overreach, an interference with a joint financial decision made by both parties." She tapped the document lightly with one finger. "This is the refinancing agreement for the Holloway primary residence executed 3 months ago, both signatures properly notarized." She paused. "Can you tell me which joint account the disbursement was directed to?" Carver looked at the document. "I'd need to review the full Page 4, Section 2C, Patricia said. "The disbursement account ends in 8847. I have the bank's certified records here." She placed the second document beside the first. "That account is not the Holloway joint checking. It is not the Holloway joint savings. It is an account that Mrs. Holloway had no knowledge of and has never accessed." She looked at Carver steadily. "So I'll ask again. Which joint account was the disbursement directed to?" Silence. "We can address the account provenance at the full hearing," Carver said. "Of course." Patricia nodded pleasantly. She placed the third document on the table. "This is the supplemental credit card issued in Mrs. Holloway's name 3 years ago. Current balance $14,700. Mrs. Holloway did not apply for this card. The application was signed during one of 7 occasions on which Mr. Holloway presented documents to his wife with the explanation that they were, and I'm quoting from Mrs. Holloway's contemporaneous notes, just paperwork honey." I watched Daniel's face across the table. He was still wearing the public expression measured concern the face of a man who loved his wife and was scared for her. But something behind the eyes had shifted. A recalculation happening in real time. "These are serious allegations," Carver said carefully. "They are documented facts," Patricia said. "There's a distinction." She looked at Judge Weston. The account ending in 8847 received $480,000 3 months ago. Mrs. Holloway's signature on that agreement was obtained under false pretenses. She was told it was a routine bank disclosure. The funds were directed to an account she didn't know existed. Patricia folded her hands. "We are not asking this court to take our word for any of this. The bank records, the original documents, and Mrs. Holloway's own copies, kept as a matter of professional habit over 23 years in family law, are all here." Gerald shifted against the wall. He looked at Carver. Carver did not look back. Daniel's hands, folded on the table, had tightened slightly at the knuckles. "We have more," Patricia said. Judge Weston leaned forward almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Walsh, continue." Patricia reached into the folder for the third stack. "Yes," she said, "I think it's time we talked about the surveillance." She walked into that room with 3 stacks of documents and 21 days of work. They walked in thinking they had already won. Before I tell you exactly what happened when Patricia put everything on that table, comment, "Ready," and let me know you're still here. Because this is the moment the entire story has been building toward. Quick note, this story contains fictional elements crafted for educational and storytelling purposes. Names and locations are coincidental. If you'd prefer to step away before this part, that's completely your choice, and I respect it. Patricia placed the photograph first. Craig Dunn's face captured by Ruth's doorbell camera on night 10. Clear enough to identify. clear enough that Daniel recognized it immediately. I saw it in the half-second before he controlled his expression. This man, Patricia said, is Craig Dunn, Regional Account Coordinator at Meridian Sales Group, Mr. Holloway's employer. She placed the Enterprise rental record beside the photograph. This is the rental agreement for the vehicle he used to conduct surveillance on Mrs. Holloway's residence on 4 consecutive nights. The rental was paid with a Meridian corporate card. She looked at Carver. Company resources, used to monitor a man's wife. That's a significant leap in Carver began. Mr. Carver. Judge Weston's voice was quiet but final. Let her finish. Patricia placed the next document. These are internal emails from Meridian's system, sent by Mr. Holloway from his company account during company hours to Craig Dunn and 2 other colleagues. She slid copies across the table, one to Carver, one to Judge Weston. The subject line of the first email reads, "Situation with Sandra, keep this between us." The content details a coordinated strategy for the mediation hearing we are currently sitting in. She paused. Prepared on company time, using company resources. Carver was reading. His face had gone very still. And finally, Patricia said, placing the last document, the family chat screenshots, "This is a group message thread involving Gerald Holloway, Beverly Holloway, and Kevin Holloway, dated 4 days before Mrs. Holloway was discharged from the hospital." She read aloud, "This might be our opening. If we move quickly on the guardianship before she gets legal advice, we can frame it as family concern." She set it down, premeditated, documented in their own words. Daniel stood up. "This is," he started. "Mr. Holloway." Judge Weston did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Sit down." He sat. The room was very quiet. Judge Weston looked at the documents spread across the table. She looked at Carver. "Counselor, does your client wish to respond to any of this?" Carver leaned toward Daniel. They exchanged 4 words in a whisper I couldn't hear. Then Carver straightened. "We would request a brief recess to—" "We're not recessing," Judge Weston said. She looked at her notes, then at Patricia, then for the first time directly at me. "Mrs. Holloway, are you represented fully by Ms. Walsh in these proceedings?" "Yes," I said. "And this documentation, the medical declaration, the financial records, the surveillance evidence, the internal communications, you are prepared to submit all of it for the formal hearing?" "Yes." She nodded, made a note. "Effective immediately, the asset freeze order remains in place pending full hearing. The guardianship petition is denied for insufficient medical basis." She looked at Carver. "Counselor, I would strongly advise your client to arrive at next Monday's formal hearing with considerably more than he brought today." Gerald stood up from his chair against the wall. "Your Honor, if I could just—" "You're an observer, Mr. Holloway," Judge Weston said without looking up. "Please sit down." He sat. I looked at Daniel. For the first time since we entered the room, he looked back at me. I held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then I looked away. I had said everything I needed to say, and I hadn't said a word. The session ended at 12:40. Patricia gathered the documents with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done exactly what she came to do. Carver was already speaking quietly into his phone in the corner. Gerald had left the room without making eye contact with anyone. Judge Weston had disappeared through the door behind the bench. Daniel had not moved from his chair. I picked up my bag, nodded to Patricia. She touched my arm briefly, just that, nothing more, and then stepped out to speak with the court clerk in the hallway. I followed her out. Marcus was standing at the end of the corridor where I had left him, holding 2 cups of coffee he had gotten from somewhere, looking at his phone. He saw my face when I came around the corner and set both cups down on the bench beside him. "Well," he said. "Guardianship denied," I said. "Freeze stays. Full hearing next Monday." He let out a long breath. "Sandra." "Not yet," I said. "Let me get outside first." I heard footsteps behind me, fast, deliberate. "Sandra." Daniel's voice. I stopped walking, didn't turn around. Marcus took a step forward. I put my hand up slightly, just a small movement enough to tell him I had it. I turned around. Daniel had stopped about 6 feet away. His jacket was slightly crooked the way it got when he was agitated and didn't realize it. The public expression was gone. What was underneath it was something I hadn't seen before, not anger, not the cold calculation I had been bracing for. Something rawer than that, something almost like the man I had married 27 years ago before everything calcified. "You didn't have to do it like this," he said. His voice was low. "You could have just talked to me." I looked at him. "I was in the hospital," I said. "You were on the 3rd floor, not for me." He opened his mouth, closed it. I waited in that room for 4 hours. I continued keeping my voice even. "I had a stroke, Daniel. I was alone, and you were 40 feet above me in the elevator, and you looked through the window for 1 minute and you left." I paused. There was nothing left to talk about after that. He looked at the floor. When he looked up again, something in his face had shifted into something I recognized less, something younger and more lost. I didn't know how to... "I know," I said, and I meant it, not as forgiveness, just as fact. "You didn't know how, and I spent 27 years pretending that was enough." I turned around. Marcus fell into step beside me. We walked to the end of the corridor, pushed through the heavy doors, and came out into the Tampa. Morning, bright, warm, the kind of November day that felt like an apology for nothing and a promise of nothing, just light on pavement and the sound of the city going about its business. I stood on the steps for a moment, breathed. "Okay," Marcus said quietly. Now, I said. We stopped for lunch on the way back. Nothing planned. Marcus just pulled into a diner on Armenia Avenue without asking, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that arrived before you ordered it. And I didn't argue because I realized I hadn't eaten since 6 in the morning, and my hands were starting to feel slightly disconnected from the rest of me. We sat in a booth by the window. Marcus ordered eggs. I ordered toast and didn't eat most of it. We didn't talk about the hearing for the first 20 minutes, which was exactly right. Then Marcus set his fork down. "There's a journalist," he said, "someone who covers family court. She's been following the Meridian angle, the corporate card, the surveillance. She reached out to Diane 2 days ago." He looked at me carefully. "Diane didn't say anything until she knew how today went. But now that it's done, she wanted me to ask you. Would you want to talk to her?" I looked at my toast. "The story writes itself," Marcus continued. "Sales manager uses company resources to surveil estranged wife. Internal emails show coordinated strategy. HR is already investigating. It's Sandra, it would be significant. It would make sure he can never do this to anyone else." I was quiet for a moment. "What about Emma?" I said. Marcus paused. "The journalist would keep Emma out of it." "She'd try to," I said, "but Emma is 16. She has a name. Her father has a name. The internet doesn't forget." I looked out the window at the traffic on Armenia Avenue. 5 years from now, Emma is going to Google her father. Maybe for a job application, maybe just because she's 21 and trying to understand her own history. And she's going to find whatever exists. I paused. If I give that journalist the emails, what she finds is a news article written by her mother about her father's worst moments. I take that choice away from her. Marcus said nothing for a moment. "And if you don't give the journalist the emails, then Emma finds court records eventually if she looks hard enough, which are public but not searchable by name the same way." I turned my coffee cup in my hands. "She gets to decide how much she wants to know, on her own timeline, when she's ready." I paused. "That's not nothing." Marcus looked at me across the table. "You just won the hardest thing you've ever fought for, and you're sitting here protecting the man who made you fight it." "I'm not protecting him," I said. "I'm protecting her. There's a difference." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded the slow nod he used when he didn't fully agree but understood completely. "What do I tell Diane?" he asked. "Tell her no," I said. "Tell her I said thank you, but no." I picked up my coffee. Outside, a cloud moved across the sun, and the light on the street changed for a moment, softer, less certain, before the sun came back. "The emails stay in the folder," I said. "Locked, in case he tries anything at the formal hearing." I set the cup down. "But that's all they're for now." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "You know," he said quietly, "you're a better person than most." "I'm a mother," I said. "It's the same thing." The formal hearing lasted 3 hours and 20 minutes. Carver had come with more than he brought to the mediation, a counter-declaration from a neurologist. I had never heard of a financial expert prepared to argue that the refinancing was a legitimate joint decision, and a revised version of the guardianship argument that had been carefully stripped of the most obvious overreach. It wasn't enough. Patricia had anticipated each piece. The neurologist's declaration was countered by Dr. Okafor's, and when Judge Patricia Simmons, the presiding judge for the formal hearing, asked Carver's expert directly whether he had ever examined Mrs. Holloway personally, the answer was no, and the declaration lost most of its weight in that single exchange. The financial expert lasted longer. He was good, methodical, credentialed, convincing in the way that paid experts are trained to be convincing. But Patricia had the account number. She had the bank records. She had the repayment schedule with the disbursement instructions in Daniel's own handwriting on the attached note. Mr. Carver. Judge Simmons said at one point, her reading glasses pushed down her nose as she reviewed the bank documents. Can you point me to any documentation showing that Mrs. Holloway had knowledge of the account ending in 8847 prior to this proceeding? Carver paused. We believe the documentation will show. Can you point me to it today? Not today, Your Honor, but. Thank you, Judge Simmons said. She made a note. Daniel sat through all of it without speaking. His hands were flat on the table in front of him, still deliberate, the posture of a man who had decided the only thing left to control was his posture. Gerald and Beverly were in the gallery. I did not look at them. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Judge Simmons read the ruling. Primary custody to Sandra Holloway. Liberal visitation schedule for Daniel Holloway to be reviewed in 12 months. The asset freeze order converted to a formal division order, Sandra retaining the primary residence, its current market value assessed at $512,000. The refinancing agreement voided on grounds of insufficient informed consent. The credit card balance of $14,700 assigned as Daniel's sole financial responsibility. Child support calculated on current verified income. The guardianship petition dismissed with prejudice. The restraining order extended for 2 years. When Judge Simmons finished, she looked up. The room was very quiet. Is there anything further from either party? Carver said, No, Your Honor. Patricia said, No, Your Honor. Daniel said nothing. He was looking at the table. I stood up, picked up my bag, thanked Judge Simmons, walked to the door. In the hallway, Patricia fell into step beside me. We walked to the elevator without speaking. When the doors closed, she looked at me. It's done, she said. Almost, I said, one more step. She looked at me. What step? I thought about Emma at the kitchen table, about the accordion folder on the shelf, about the letter I hadn't written yet. A personal one, I said. Nothing you need to file. Paul Garrett called on a Tuesday morning 8 days after the formal hearing. I was in the backyard of my parents' house, sitting in one of the old lawn chairs my father had kept for 30 years, the kind with the woven plastic straps that leave patterns on the backs of your legs. Emma was at school. My parents were at their Tuesday morning grocery run. The yard was completely quiet except for a mockingbird in the oak tree that had been cycling through the same 4 songs for the past 20 minutes. I answered on the second ring. Mrs. Holloway. Paul's voice was the same as the first call, careful, measured, but slightly less rehearsed now, like a man who had made a decision and was living with it without regret. I wanted to give you an update. I thought you deserved to know how things landed on our end. I appreciate that, I said. How did they land? HR completed their preliminary review yesterday. The emails, the ones I forwarded you and others they found when they started looking, were enough to open a formal investigation. A pause. Daniel was placed on administrative leave Friday morning. Pending outcome of the investigation, his position is effectively suspended. Another pause. Craig Dunn resigned Thursday. Apparently, he didn't wait to find out what the investigation would conclude. I looked at the mockingbird in the oak tree. It had moved on to a new song, something cleaner, higher. Paul, I said, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you call me that first time you didn't know me? You had no obligation. He was quiet for a moment. 11 years at Meridian, he said finally. I've watched a lot of things get handled the wrong way and told myself it wasn't my business. A breath. The emails were different. He was using company systems to build a case against his own wife, using our infrastructure, our servers, our card, our people to run what amounted to a harassment operation. His voice tightened slightly. That made it my business. And frankly, it made it everyone's business who works there. It took courage, I said. I want you to know that. It took being tired of looking the other way, he said. I'm not sure that's the same thing as courage. Sometimes it is, I said. After the call, I sat in the lawn chair for a long time. The mockingbird had gone quiet. The yard was still. I picked up my notebook from the armrest. I still carried it everywhere, habit now as much as necessity, and opened it to the last active page. I wrote day 29. Meridian HR investigation open. Daniel administrative leave. Craig Dunn resigned. I looked at what I had written. Then I turned to the very first page. Case file. Day 1. 2 words in a hospital room typed on a phone in the dark while a heart monitor beeped beside me, and the man I had been married to for 27 years was 40 feet above me on the 3rd floor. 29 days. I closed the notebook, set it on the armrest, and sat in my father's old lawn chair in the November sunshine, listening to the yard be quiet for a long time. Patricia's office looked different in the afternoon light. I had been there a dozen times over the past month, always in the morning, always with something urgent. This time, I arrived at 2 o'clock with nothing but my bag. The files on her desk were pushed to the edges. The center was clear. She slid a summary sheet across when I sat down. The bank completed the adjustment this morning, she said. I want to walk you through it. Go ahead. The refinancing agreement is formally voided. The account ending in 8847 has been flagged for further review. Separate matter, no longer your problem. She made a check on her copy. The primary residence on West Haven Drive is assessed at $512,000. Full ownership assigned to you, clear of the voided encumbrance. I looked at the number, the house I had chosen, the kitchen with the oak table. The supplemental credit card, Patricia continued. $14,712 formally reassigned as Daniel's sole financial obligation. The card is closed. Your credit record reflects no liability. And the joint accounts divided per the order. Yours has been separated into a new account in your name only. She looked up. Child support is calculated on his current verified income. If his employment situation changes, we file for modification. Standard process. How long? 30 days. She set her pen down. Sandra, I want to say something outside of legal advice. In 20 years of family law, I've had maybe a dozen clients with documentation as organized as yours. Most people come in with grief and fragments. She held my gaze. You came in with a structure. That structure is why we got everything we asked for. I looked at the summary sheet. $512,000. A house. Emma's room down the hall. The kitchen where I had sat alone at 2 a.m. reading documents I should have read years earlier. The money that went into that account, I said. Will it come back? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Some of it possibly through civil process. Not all. Probably not quickly. She paused. Are you okay with that? I thought about it honestly. I have the house, I said. I have Emma, I have my job. I folded the summary sheet along its crease. The rest is just money. I don't want anything from him anymore. Then I think we're done here, Patricia said. Almost. I picked up my bag. Send me your invoice, the full one. I want to pay it myself. She looked at me for a moment. Then something crossed her face that was as close to a smile as I had seen from her in a month. I'll have it to you by Friday, she said. I stood, shook her hand, walked out into the afternoon. Outside, I stopped on the sidewalk, opened my notebook, turned to the last page with writing on it. Day 29, Meridian investigation open, Daniel administrative leave. I wrote one more line beneath it, day 36, house done, accounts done, invoice pending. Then I closed the notebook, put it in my bag. And for the first time in 36 days, I didn't open it again that evening. Diane was already at the corner table when I arrived. Same spot as last time, backs to the wall facing the door. She had a coffee and a folder she wasn't looking at. She looked for the first time since this had all begun, like someone who had set something down and was deciding whether she needed to pick it up again. She didn't. "I have an update," she said when I sat down, "from the community side of things. Tell me." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "The family chat screenshots, the ones Melissa sent you, made it into the court record, which is public. Nobody went looking for it specifically, but word travels in a neighborhood like ours, Sandra. It travels in churches, in school parking lots." She paused. "Beverly called Janet Morehouse 2 weeks ago. Janet runs the hospitality committee at their church. Beverly wanted to explain the situation, give her side of things before Janet heard it elsewhere. What did Janet say?" "She listened, very politely." Diane looked at her coffee, and then she didn't return the next 3 calls. I said nothing. "Gerald went to the Rotary meeting last Tuesday," Diane continued. "He's been going for 15 years. He sat down at the table where he always sits, the one with the same 4 men he's had lunch with every 3rd Tuesday since 2008. She paused. "The conversation was perfectly civil. Nobody was rude. Nobody said a word about any of it." She looked up at me. "But 2 of those men have daughters, and they had read the court record." "Did anyone say anything directly?" "No," Diane said. "That's the thing about people like Gerald and Beverly. Their whole currency is dignity, public standing, being the kind of family that other families respect." She turned her cup slowly on the table. "Nobody took that from them loudly. Nobody made a scene. They just withdrew. Quietly. The way people do when they've decided something without needing to announce it." I looked out the window at the street. "Is that enough?" Diane asked, not challenging, genuinely asking. I thought about it. "It's not about enough," I said finally. "Enough implies I needed something from them. I didn't." I looked back at her. They made choices. Those choices have weight. Other people can feel that weight now. I paused. That's all I ever wanted. Not punishment, just accuracy. I wanted the world to see them accurately. Diane nodded slowly. "I think it does now." We sat with that for a moment. "How are you?" she asked. "Really?" I considered the question honestly, the way I had learned to do over the past month, not the reflexive fine, not the performance of recovery, just the actual answer. "I feel quiet," I said. "For the first time in a very long time, I feel quiet." Diane smiled. "Small real, the kind that doesn't need anything added to it." "Good," she said. "You've earned that." Emma went to bed at 10. I heard her moving around upstairs bathroom closet, the small click of her bedside lamp. Then silence. I sat at the writing desk in my room with a blank sheet of paper in front of me that I had placed there 20 minutes earlier without yet touching. I picked up the pen. "Emma, you're 16 right now. By the time you read this, if you ever do, you'll be older. Old enough, I hope, to understand what I'm about to say and why I'm saying it this way instead of sitting across the table from you. This is not a letter about your father. What he did belongs to him. It is not the thing I want you to remember about this year. What I want you to remember is this. For a long time, I confused kindness with silence. I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family. I thought if I didn't make anything harder than it already was, things would eventually get easier on their own. They didn't. And the cost of waiting was paid by both of us. Loving someone does not mean absorbing everything they do to you. It does not mean shrinking yourself small enough that the other person never has to feel uncomfortable. Love is not a performance of endurance, and silence, the kind I practiced for 27 years, is not peace. It is postponed pain, accumulating interest. I fought this year not because I stopped loving your father. I fought because I started finally to love myself with the same seriousness I had always loved everyone else. I want that for you. I want you to be the kind of woman who knows the difference between patience and resignation, who understands that her story has value and deserves to be told accurately. The bravest thing I did this year was not the filing or the hearings or the evidence. It was deciding on a gurney in a hospital hallway that the truth was worth the trouble. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter once, placed it in an envelope without sealing it, Put it in the fireproof box behind the deed to the house and Emma's birth certificate. She would find it someday, if she ever needed to. I turned off the desk lamp, sat in the dark for a while, listening to the house breathe around me. Emma upstairs, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen below the oak tree outside, moving slightly in the November wind. It was quiet. Real quiet. Not the careful, managed quiet of a house where people were avoiding each other, just the ordinary, unremarkable quiet of a home where everyone inside it was safe. I had forgotten what that felt like. I sat with it for a long time before I went to bed. I was making pasta when he called. Nothing significant about the evening. Emma was at a friend's house until 8. My parents had gone to bed early, and I was standing at the stove on West Haven Drive for the first time since I had left in the kitchen I had chosen 20 years ago, cooking for one. The oak table was behind me, cleared and clean. The good dishes were behind the glass cabinet doors, exactly where they had always been. I had moved back 3 weeks earlier. The house was the same. I was not. The phone buzzed on the counter. I looked at the screen. Daniel, direct number, not through Carver, not through Patricia. I turned the burner down. Answered. Sandra. His voice was different. The careful warmth was gone, not replaced by anger, just replaced by something quieter and more worn. The voice of a man who had stopped performing. Daniel. A pause. I lost the job last Friday. HR completed the investigation. Another pause. I'm not calling to make it your problem. I wanted you to know, not from someone else. I looked at the pot on the stove, the water barely simmering. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it in the limited way that you can mean something for a person who has caused you significant harm, not sorry for the outcome, but sorry that a life had arrived at a place this diminished. Are you... He didn't say it bitterly, just honestly. For the parts that weren't about what you did to me, I said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then, how is she? She's good. She's at Maya's tonight. She has a history paper due Thursday that she hasn't started yet. I paused. She's fine, Daniel. Does she ask about me? I thought about Emma at the kitchen table. The careful way she had been processing all of this, storing things, moving through them, quietly on her own timeline. Sometimes, I said, in her own way. What do you tell her? That her father loves her, I said. That some things between adults are complicated. That complicated doesn't mean she has to choose sides. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Saturday is still your time, I said. That hasn't changed. I know, a breath. Thank you for that. It's not for you, I said. It's for her. Another silence, longer this time. Sandra. His voice had dropped to something I barely recognized, stripped of everything, just the person underneath all the management and calculation. I'm sorry for all of it. I know it doesn't fix anything. I turned the burner back up, watched the water begin to move. No, and I said, it doesn't. I paused. But I heard you. I ended the call, set the phone face down on the counter, added the pasta to the pot, watched it sink slowly into the water. What he had always wanted from me was silence, and I had finally given it to him, not as submission, but as the last thing I had left to offer. The silence of someone who no longer needed to fight because the fighting was finished. Patricia's office was quiet on a Thursday afternoon in February. The parking lot outside her window had 3 cars in it. The coffee machine in the hallway made its usual noise. Everything ordinary, everything unhurried, the particular atmosphere of a place where the urgent thing has already been handled, and what remains is just the paperwork of finishing. She was at her desk when I came in, 1 document in the center, 1 pen beside it. This is the last one, she said. I sat down, read it through completely, every line, every clause, every defined term, the way I should have read things years ago, the way I would read everything from now on. Any questions? Patricia asked. No, I said, it's correct. I signed it, dated it, pushed it back across the desk. Patricia countersigned her copy, clipped them together, and placed them in a manila envelope. She held it out to me. You're set. I took it. Held it for a moment, this thin envelope that represented the legal conclusion of 27 years. It weighed almost nothing. "Thank you," I said, "for all of it." She looked at me steadily. "You did the work, Sandra. I just filed the paperwork." "That's not nothing," I said. "No," she agreed. "It's not." I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat. West Haven Drive looked the same as it always had, the oak trees, the quiet suburban street, the late afternoon light going gold the way it did in February when the sun was lower. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a moment before going in. The accordion folder was where I had left it on the kitchen table, the one I had spread everything across on the night of day 2. Color-coded tabs, 23 years of professional habit. I opened it, placed the envelope from Patricia at the very back behind everything else. Then I carried it upstairs. In my bedroom, on the shelf above the writing desk, I had made a space between 2 books. I took the folder down, looked at it one more time, the tabs, the labels, the handwriting on the outside in my own careful print. I took a marker from the desk drawer, wrote 2 words on the front cover. Resolved. I placed it on the shelf. Beside it already there was the fireproof box containing Emma's birth certificate, the deed to the house, and an unsealed envelope with her name on it in my handwriting. The folder and the letter side by side. One for the courts, one for my daughter. I stepped back and looked at both of them on the shelf. 21 days to build it, 3 months to finish it, 27 years before that to make it necessary. I turned off the light and went downstairs to start dinner. I made chicken and rice. Nothing complicated, the kind of meal that comes together without requiring much attention, which was what I needed on a Thursday evening in February when the last piece of paperwork had been signed and the only thing left was to be in the house and be ordinary. Emma came downstairs at 6:30. She set the table without being asked, plates, forks, glasses of water, and sat down across from me the way she had been sitting across from me at kitchen tables her whole life. We ate. She told me about a disagreement with a friend that had resolved itself by lunchtime. I told her Patricia had called about a new case at the office. Normal things, the currency of an ordinary evening. She finished eating before I did. She pushed her plate to the side and rested her chin in her hand, looking at me in the particular way she had, direct thinking taking her time. "Mom," she said, "were you scared back then, when everything was happening?" I set my fork down, looked at her, at this 16-year-old person who had sat quietly through 3 months of upheaval, processing everything in her careful, private way, and had apparently been holding this question for a while. "Yes," I said. "Very scared." She nodded slowly. "Of what specifically?" "A lot of things. Losing the house, losing the case, making it worse." I paused. "Losing you in some way I couldn't quite name." "You weren't going to lose me," she said simply. "I know that now." She was quiet for a moment. "Then why didn't you stop?" "When you were scared, I mean. Most people would have just stopped." I thought about the gurney, about the fluorescent lights, about the nurse's voice and the calendar entry and the folder in the car trunk and 21 days of building something from whatever each day offered. "Because I was more scared of something else," I said. Emma tilted her head slightly. "What?" "I was scared that you'd grow up watching me stay silent and think that was what strength looked like." I looked at her across the table. "I was scared you'd learn from me that the way to survive something hard is to pretend it isn't happening." She didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at her water glass, then back at me. "I wouldn't have thought that," she said. "Maybe not," I said, "but I wasn't willing to find out." She nodded, picked up her plate and carried it to the sink, rinsed it without being asked. Then she turned around and leaned against the counter, looking at me with an expression I didn't quite have a name for. Something older than 16, something that had been there for a while and was only now deciding to show itself. "I'm glad you didn't stop," she said. She went back upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table alone, listening to her footsteps move across the ceiling above me. 3 steps to the closet. Pause. 4 steps to the bathroom. The sounds of someone safe going about the ordinary business of an ordinary evening. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, turned off the kitchen light. I developed a new habit in February. Every morning before Emma woke up and before the day required anything from me, I made coffee and took it outside to the front porch. Just 15 minutes, sometimes 20. The street was quiet at that hour, the oak trees holding the early light, the neighborhood still deciding whether to begin. Tampa in February had a quality of morning that I had never properly noticed in 20 years of living here, because in 20 years of living here, I had always been in a hurry to get to the next thing. I was not in a hurry anymore. I was sitting in the porch chair on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the last signature, when the thought arrived, the way thoughts do, when you've stopped filling every quiet moment with noise without announcement, without effort, simply there. I thought about the nurse. I had thought about her many times over the past 3 months, about the words she had said to her colleague in a hospital hallway, not knowing I was listening. Words she had probably forgotten by the end of her shift. Words that had rearranged everything. He's up on 3, but not for her. For a long time, I had carried those words as the cruelest thing I had heard in my life. The sentence that had confirmed what I had been refusing to know. The moment the House of Explanations finally came down. But sitting on my porch in the February morning with my coffee going cold in my hands, I understood something I hadn't understood before. Those words had saved me. Not a person, not a plan, not 23 years of professional habit, though that had helped. The thing that had actually saved me was a sentence spoken by a stranger who had no idea she was speaking it to anyone at all. The truth said carelessly in a hallway to nobody in particular, and I had been in the right place to hear it. I looked out at the street, the oak trees, the quiet houses, the ordinary Tuesday morning going about its business without requiring anything from me. He was on the 3rd floor. I said it out loud quietly just to hear it in the open air rather than only in my head. He was on the 3rd floor, and I am here. Not angry, not triumphant, just accurate, just true. I finished my coffee, heard Emma's alarm go off upstairs, the particular muffled sound of it through the ceiling, followed by the pause where she always considered ignoring it, followed by the sounds of her getting up anyway. I went inside to start breakfast. At the top of the stairs on my way to the kitchen, I passed the shelf in the hallway. The accordion folder with "Resolved" written on the front in my own handwriting. The fireproof box beside it with Emma's letter inside. I didn't stop, didn't touch either of them. I just walked past the way you walk past things that are finished with the particular ease of someone who no longer needs to carry them. Being kind does not mean being silent, and silence sometimes is the cruelest thing we can do to ourselves. Looking back now, I think about the woman I was on that gurney staring up at fluorescent lights, listening to a sentence that was never meant for me, feeling 27 years of careful explanations come apart all at once. I spent too long being kind in the wrong direction, kind to the piece, kind to the image, kind to the idea of a marriage rather than the reality of one. And I told myself that was love. It wasn't. It was fear dressed in patient clothing. If I could say one thing to any woman who recognizes something in this story, don't do what I did. Don't wait for a hospital gurney to tell you the truth you already know. Don't keep signing papers you haven't read in a life you haven't examined for a version of yourself that stopped being real years ago. The records you keep the details. You notice the quiet voice inside you that says something is wrong. Trust them. Earlier than I did. I'm not bitter about how long it took. God used every year of it, the paralegal training, the habit of documentation, even the loneliness to build exactly the tools I needed when the moment came. Nothing was wasted. But I wish I had listened sooner. My personal belief is simple: you cannot protect anyone else if you have spent everything protecting an illusion. Not your children, not yourself, no one. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me what part hit hardest. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is let another person know they are not alone. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And thank you genuinely for staying until the end. One last thing, some stories on this channel contain fictional elements created purely for reflection and education. If that's not for you, that's completely okay. Step away and find what serves you better. No judgment here, only honesty.